forgotten child, I was always second place until I changed the rules. I was at the altar when I got the text. Sorry honey, can't make it. Noah brought Paige to dinner and we lost track of time. Send pics. My hand shook as I read my mother's message, the phone nearly slipping between my fingers. A text. On my wedding day. Not even a call. Everything okay? Whispered James, my soon-to-be husband, his brow creased with concern. I forced a smile. Perfect. I slid the phone into the hidden pocket of my wedding dress, the best $100 extra I ever spent, and squared my shoulders. The organist was already playing the wedding march. 65 guests had turned to watch me. 65. Not 67. My parents' seats in the front row glared back at me, empty. Let me back up. I'm Ellie Martinez, 32, middle school art teacher, and perpetual afterthought in the Chin family dynamic. My brother Noah is the golden child, Harvard Business School, Silicon Valley startup that just hit unicorn status, and movie star looks that make people stop on the street. I'm me. I teach art to preteens who'd rather be on TikTok. I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Oakland that I can barely afford. And apparently, I'm so forgettable that my parents couldn't make it to my wedding because my brother brought his new girlfriend to dinner. Not his fiancée. Not his wife. His girlfriend of 3 months. I'd scheduled my wedding a year in advance. Sent fancy invitations with actual calligraphy. Called weekly to make sure they had it on their calendar. My mother had even helped pick out my dress. You're spiraling, James said later at our reception, rubbing my back as I hyperventilated in the venue's kitchen. Try to focus on the good stuff. The ceremony was beautiful. Everyone loved your vows. Everyone except my parents, who never heard them. I nodded, dabbing at my eyes with a napkin, careful not to smudge my makeup. You're right. I'm being dramatic. But I wasn't. This was just the latest in a lifetime of being second place. When I got into Rhode Island School of Design, my parents couldn't attend the orientation because Noah had a high school debate tournament. When I held my first art exhibition, they left halfway through because Noah called with big news about a promotion. My entire life has been a series of sorry, Ellie, but Noah needs. I'd hoped my wedding would be different. It wasn't. They'll make it up to you, James said as we drove to the airport for our honeymoon. They always do. That was true. My parents' guilt usually manifested in expensive gifts and teary apologies. Last Christmas, after they'd cancelled our traditional family dumpling making because Noah had surprised them with tickets to Aspen, they'd sent me a Hermes scarf that probably cost more than my monthly rent. But I was tired of designer guilt gifts. I wanted my parents to show up. Just once, I wanted to be the priority. I don't want to talk about it, I said, turning up the radio. We're going to Hawaii. Let's focus on that. Our honeymoon was perfect, sunrise hikes, lazy afternoons on the beach, and long evenings spent talking about our future. James wanted kids, I was hesitant. My own childhood had left me with some deep insecurities about parenting. We wouldn't play favorites, James assured me as we watched the sunset from our balcony. I grew up in a house like that too, remember? I know how it feels. James was the youngest of 4, constantly overshadowed by his siblings' achievements. We'd bonded over that shared experience when we first met at a friend's housewarming party. He understood me in ways no one else did. I know, I said, leaning into him. I just need time. I checked my phone. Still nothing from my parents. I'd posted our wedding photos on Instagram 3 days ago. My mother, who religiously liked and commented on all of Noah's posts within minutes, hadn't even opened my message. A familiar hollowness spread through my chest. I put the phone down and took a deep breath of salty air. Let's get dinner, I said to James. I'm starving. We returned home to find a large package outside our apartment door. Inside was an expensive espresso machine and a card from my parents. Congratulations to the happy couple. Sorry we missed the big day. Emergency with Noah's company. We'll explain everything over dinner next week. Love, Mom and Dad. I crumpled the card and threw it across the room. Ellie, James started, his voice gentle. They're lying, I said, my voice shaking. The emergency was dinner with Noah's girlfriend. They texted me, remember? They didn't even bother to keep their excuse straight. James picked up the card, smoothing it out. Maybe we should hear them out. Why? So they can explain how Noah's love life is more important than their daughter's wedding? I paced our small living room. I'm done, James. I've spent my entire life making excuses for them, telling myself that next time will be different. It never is. What are you going to do? He asked. I stopped pacing and looked at him. I'm going to change the rules. I declined my parents' dinner invitation with a brief text, too busy. Maybe next month. It was the first time in my life I'd ever said no to them. My finger hovered over the send button for a full minute before I finally pressed it. Within seconds, my phone rang. My mother's face flashed on the screen. I declined the call. She called again. And again. And again. I turned my phone off. Are you sure about this? James asked as we sat on our couch, the silent phone between us. No, I admitted. But I can't keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. 2 days later, my mother showed up at my school during lunch break, causing a minor sensation among my students. Ms. Chin Martinez, is that your mom? She's wearing Louboutins to a middle school. Eleanor, she said, using my full name, a sign she was upset. Why aren't you answering our calls? I continued organizing paintbrushes, not looking up. I'm working, Mom. We've been worried sick. Your father thought something happened during your honeymoon. I finally met her eyes. Something did happen. I got married. You weren't there. Her face flushed. We've explained about that. Noah had a crisis with his investors. That's not what you texted me, I cut in. You said you were having dinner with Noah and Paige and lost track of time. She blinked, momentarily thrown off. Well, yes, we were having dinner to discuss the crisis. Stop lying, I said quietly. You missed my wedding because Noah's dinner date was more important. Just admit it. That's not fair, Ellie. You know we love you just as much as Noah? No, I don't know that. In fact, I have 32 years of evidence to the contrary. I put down the paintbrushes. I have a class in 5 minutes. We want to make this right, she said, her voice softening. We've booked a table at Chez Pannis for Friday. We can celebrate properly. The old Ellie would have said yes. The old Ellie would have been pathetically grateful for this crumb of attention. I'll think about it, I said instead. I didn't go to dinner. Instead, I blocked my parents' numbers and asked James to do the same. This feels extreme, he said as he reluctantly adjusted his phone settings. It's temporary, I assured him. I just need space to figure out what kind of relationship I actually want with them. I can't do that when they're love bombing me with expensive restaurants and guilt trips. The next few weeks were hard. I'd never gone more than a few days without speaking to my parents, even when I was furious with them. They were still my parents. I loved them, despite everything. They began showing up places, outside my apartment, at school, even at the art supply store I frequented on weekends. James had to ask them to leave our property twice. They're freaking out, he reported after the second time. Your dad was crying, Ellie. A small, wounded part of me was satisfied by this. Let them feel a fraction of the hurt I'd felt all these years. But mostly, I felt sad. Sad that it had come to this. A month into our standoff, I got an email from Noah. The subject line read, "Please talk to Mom and Dad." I almost deleted it without reading. Noah and I had never been close. Growing up, he'd been too busy collecting achievements to pay much attention to his ordinary sister. As adults, we exchanged obligatory birthday messages and saw each other at family gatherings, but that was it. Curiosity got the better of me. Ellie, I don't know what's going on between you and our parents, but they're falling apart. Dad's not sleeping, and Mom cried through my entire investor presentation yesterday. Whatever they did, I'm sure they're sorry. They always thought you were the strong one, you know. The one who didn't need them hovering. Maybe they took that for granted. I know I did. Anyway, please call them. Or I can come over, and we can talk. Just let me know. Noah. I read it 3 times, my emotions shifting from anger to confusion to something approaching understanding. They thought I was the strong one? I'd spent my entire life feeling like I was the fragile one, the disappointment, the one who couldn't compete with Noah's brilliance. It had never occurred to me that my parents might see me differently, as self-sufficient, capable, not needing their constant attention. It didn't excuse their behavior, but it offered a perspective I hadn't considered. I forwarded the email to James with the message, "What do you think?" He replied almost immediately, "I think you should talk to them. But on your terms." I agreed to meet my parents at a neutral location, a coffee shop halfway between my apartment and their house in Palo Alto. I arrived early and chose a table in the corner, my heart pounding as I waited. They walked in 10 minutes late, looking older and more tired than I remembered. My mother had dark circles under her eyes, and my father's shoulders were slumped. They spotted me and hurried over, relief washing over their faces. "Ellie," my mother breathed, reaching for me. I stood but kept the table between us. "Let's sit." They exchanged a glance but complied. "We've been so worried," my father started. "I needed space," I said. "I still do. But I thought we should talk." "We are so sorry about missing your wedding," my mother said, her eyes filling with tears. "There's no excuse. We messed up terribly." "It wasn't just the wedding," I said. "It's been my whole life. I've always come second to Noah. Always." They looked stunned. "That's not true," my father protested. "It is," I insisted. Every milestone, every achievement, every important moment, if it conflicted with something involving Noah, guess which one took priority? My mother reached for her purse and pulled out a tissue. "We never meant to make you feel that way." "Intentions don't matter," I said. "The impact does. And the impact has been that I've spent my entire life feeling like I'm not enough. Like nothing I do will ever be as important as whatever Noah is doing." My father rubbed his forehead. "Ellie, we've always been so proud of you. You've been so independent, so capable. Noah, he's always needed more guidance, more support." I laughed incredulously. "Noah? Mr. Perfect? Mr. Harvard Business School?" "Noah has always struggled with anxiety," my mother said quietly. "Since he was little. The achievements, the success, that's how he copes. He pushes himself relentlessly because he's terrified of failing. We've spent thousands on therapy over the years." I sat back, genuinely shocked. "I had no idea." "We didn't want to burden you with it," my father explained. "You were always so self-assured, so comfortable in your own skin. We thought." He trailed off. "You thought I didn't need you," I finished for him. They both looked down at the table. "We were wrong," my mother admitted. "We took your strength for granted. We assumed you understood how proud we are of you, how much we admire the life you've built." "You never said that," I whispered. "We should have," my father said. "We should have said it every day." The conversation lasted 3 hours. We cried, we argued, we apologized. For the first time in my life, I told my parents exactly how I felt, not the sanitized version I thought they wanted to hear, but the raw, unfiltered truth. And they listened. It wasn't a magical fix. 32 years of feeling second best doesn't disappear after one conversation, no matter how honest. But it was a start. As we were preparing to leave, my mother reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped package. This isn't meant to be a bribe or a replacement for being there, she said, handing it to me. It's something we should have given you a long time ago. Inside was a leather-bound journal. I opened it to find it filled with my mother's handwriting, pages and pages of entries dating back to my childhood. I've kept a journal about you since you were born, she explained. All the little moments, the things you said, the milestones. I have one for Noah too, but this one is just yours. I flipped through the pages, seeing my life through my mother's eyes. There were entries about my first painting, about the time I stood up to a bully in 3rd grade, about how proud she was when I got my teaching degree. It was a detailed chronicle of a child who was seen, who was valued, who was loved. Why didn't you ever show me this? I asked, my voice thick. I thought I showed you every day, she said simply. I was wrong. Over the next few months, we established new boundaries. I was clear about what I needed: regular one-on-one time without Noah, acknowledgement of my achievements, respect for my career choices. They didn't always get it right, but they were trying. The biggest surprise was Noah. After our coffee shop summit, my parents apparently had a similar conversation with him. He called me one evening, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I never knew you felt overshadowed, he said. I always thought you were the favorite. I nearly dropped the phone. What? How could you possibly think that? You were always so free, he explained. Mom and Dad let you pursue art, let you choose your own path. They've been micromanaging my life since I was in diapers. I had to fight for every bit of independence. It was like looking at my childhood through a funhouse mirror, recognizable but distorted beyond belief. I thought they gave you freedom because they didn't care what I did, I said. I thought they focused on you because you were the one they were proud of. God, no, Noah said with a hollow laugh. They focused on me because they thought I'd fall apart without their constant supervision. Do you know I had panic attacks before every debate tournament? Every exam? They were always hovering because I was a mess. We talked for hours that night, comparing notes on our completely different experiences of the same family. It was the first real conversation we'd ever had. 6 months after my wedding, my parents threw us a surprise reception, the celebration they should have been present for the first time. They invited all our original guests plus a few more, rented a beautiful venue, and gave tearful speeches about how proud they were of the woman I'd become. To my incredible daughter, my father said, raising his glass. Who had the courage to teach her parents how to be better parents? We are so sorry we missed your wedding day. We can never get that back. But we promise that from now on, we will show up for you, not just physically, but emotionally too. I looked around the room at the faces of the people I loved, James, my friends, my students who had surprised me by creating artwork for the venue, and yes, my parents and Noah. I realized something profound in that moment: changing the rules hadn't just transformed my relationship with my family. It had transformed me. I was no longer the forgotten child, the perpetual second place. I was Ellie Martinez, worthy of love, worthy of attention, worthy of being someone's priority. Later that evening, as James and I swayed to our first dance, again, I whispered in his ear, "Let's have a baby." He pulled back, eyes wide. "Are you sure?" "What changed?" I smiled, my heart full. "I'm not afraid anymore. I know exactly what kind of parent I want to be, and what kind I don't want to be. And more importantly, I know I'm strong enough to do it right." "You always have been," he said, kissing me softly. As we danced, I caught my mother's eye across the room. She was watching us, her face glowing with a pride I'd always craved but rarely seen. She mouthed 3 words to me: "You were right." And I was. Sometimes, you have to change the rules to change the game. Sometimes, walking away is the only way to find your way back. Sometimes, you have to demand the love you deserve instead of accepting the love you're given. I spent 32 years being second place in my own family. It took one missed wedding for me to finally say, no more. Now, I'm nobody's afterthought. I'm the main character in my own story. And it's a story worth telling. The end.